Hello, hello, and welcome to another Sunday morning edition of Taoism, brought to you by the Taoism Online. The Taoism Online is a Medium publication that publishes several different kinds of articles throughout the week, focusing on spirituality, religion, philosophy, Taoism being one of those topics, obviously. It's called the Taoist Online because you'll find Taoism ideas and concepts in a lot of different philosophies and religions in the modern age. So, what we do here every week is we are working through this book, 365 Tao by Ding Ning Tao. We take a couple of chapters per week, and I read them, and we talk about them, discuss them, see what we can glean, what wisdom we can absorb from its page. All right. So, that being said, let's get started. Chapter 20 is happiness. It starts off with a poem, as does every chapter. Let us not follow vulgar leaders who exploit the fear of death and promise the bliss of salvation. If we are truly happy, they will have nothing to offer. Some leaders use threats to win adherents. They invoke death to force good behavior and to herd people toward paradise. Others woo with grand promises. If you have no satisfaction, they offer bliss. If you feel inadequate, they offer success. If you are lonely, they offer acceptance. But if we do not fear death and are happy, what will such leaders have to offer? Spirituality is an organic part of daily life, not something dispensed by a professional. True spirituality is liberation, not just from the delusions of reality, but from the delusions of religion as well. If we attain freedom from the fear of death, a sound way of health, and a path of understanding through life, there is happiness and no need for false leaders. So, for those who are new, the seminal text of Taoism is the Tao Te Ching. This is my copy. This is the Guy Fu Feng and Jane English translation. It was written or collected somewhere between 2,500 years ago, 2,000 years ago, give or take, depending on who you ask. But it's mainly written as a book for leaders, as a political statement against the current ruling class in China back then. So a lot of it is a warning or a way to lead people, way to conduct yourself if you happen to find yourself in a place of leadership. So here in chapter 20, talks about happiness as it pertains to following people of authority. I don't think it comes as a surprise when we look around at our political leaders of multiple countries to say that things are pretty crazy right now. I mean, I guess they always are. They're just the type of crazy just changes from leader to leader, I suppose. But even 2,000 years ago, people weren't stupid. They saw leaders for being liars and criminals and crooks, trying to convince people to let them stay in power and consolidating power around them. So here we again get some warning on what we should and shouldn't do with our leaders, especially as it comes to spiritual leaders. This is a warning against, how I read it, is a warning against organized religion. Leaders who try to tell you they speak to their, they are the conduit for which you can find spiritual happiness. I think this takes a true spiritual liberation is internalized. That's something you find within yourself through looking within, through studying external texts and people and other ideas and philosophy. And when you internalize those things and you figure out kind of what you believe, that is very liberating. And that's where kind of this true spiritual happiness comes from, right? That's why it says true spirituality is liberation, not just from delusions of reality, but from the delusions of religion as well. Growing up in a Christian church, I always used to hear, faith wasn't, a book or a pastor. Faith was internalized, right? Faith was something you had deep inside you, and you had to come to it by yourself. And I always liked that. That was always thought that was a good way to think about all religion, really. So don't let anyone else tell you what you believe or what is true, right? As a Taoist, you find what's true for you and what works. And yes, there are universal truths that propagate throughout all of existence, but it's the manifestations of that truth that look different. All right, moving on. Chapter 21, skills. Zither, chess, book, painting, sword. These symbolize classical skill. There was once a wanderer who cared nothing for fame. Although he had many chances for position, he continued to search for teachers who could help him master 5 things: zither, chess, book, painting, and sword. The zither gave him music, which expressed the soul. Chess cultivated strategy and a response to the actions of another. Books gave him academic education. Painting was the exercise of beauty and sensitivity. Sword was a means for health and defense. One day, a little boy asked the wanderer what he would do if he lost his 5 things. At first, the wanderer was frightened, but he soon realized that his zither could not play itself. The chessboard was nothing without players. A book needed a reader. Brush and ink could not move on their own accord, and the sword could not be unsheathed without a hand. He realized that his cultivation was not merely for the acquisition of skills. It was a path to the innermost part of his being. So, in the chat, a good definition of what a zither is. It is a musical instrument consisting of a flat wooden sound box with numerous strings stretched across, placed horizontally and played with fingers in a plexus. It is a stringed musical instrument. So let's keep that in mind as we go through this. So here's what I take from this chapter. You can be the most skilled person on earth in everything, in anything, right? It could be one thing, could be 5 things, could be a million things. And you can think you are the most well-rounded, talented person there is, but none of that matters if you're truly alone. It's Taoism a lot of times speaks against knowledge for knowledge's sake, right? It doesn't, the texts don't seem to appreciate studying and studying and studying and studying for no purpose, right? It's just energy wasted. I think a lot about uh, the study of the stars and how the universe began, and I find these things extremely interesting. I've grown up watching, science uh, specials on TV and studying physics, and I think those things are amazing and fascinating. But if I were to sit in my room all day and just read these things, it's it's like, why? Like, why? Like, what am I doing with that knowledge? It's not against learning, but it's against learning for no apparent reason. Like, in this example, the guy can play music, he's a good swordsman, he can play chess, he can do all these things. But this little boy comes up and says, what would you do if you lost your thing? What would they, like, all these skills basically have amounted to nothing because there's nothing to do with any of them because he's just alone all the time. So it's really pushing that idea of sharing what you have learned with others, right? Learning something so that it can benefit not only yourself, but for your community and for your family and maybe your friends or people you talk to online, the people you come in contact with, right? Like, make sure what you're learning and what you're spending time on is useful and needed education, right? I had a college professor who once told me, when you get out of this college, your education doesn't stop. It just becomes what you want it to be. And you are now in charge of everything you learn from here on out. So if you don't want to learn anything new, you can. You can stop learning at 24 and just go about your life and be done with it. You don't have to learn really anything new. But if you do, if you are inquisitive, curious, then this would say, make sure that what you are learning is helpful, right? Is needed. All right. Moving on. Chapter 22, communication. Movement, object, speech, and word. We communicate through gross symbols. We call them objective, but we cannot escape our point of view. Cannot communicate directly from mind to mind, and so misinterpretation is a perennial problem. Motions, signs, talking, and the written word are all encumbered by miscommunication. A dozen eyewitnesses to the same event cannot agree on a single account. We may see each other different in cards set up by a circus magician. Therefore, we are forever imprisoned by our subjectivity. Followers of Tao assert that we know no absolute truth in the world, only varying degrees of ambiguity. Some call this poetry, some call this art. The fact remains that all communication is relative. Those who follow Tao are practical. They know that words are imperfect and therefore give a limited importance. The symbol is not the same as the reality. This is one of my favorite topics on Taoism. Words. What are words? So I have this statue here. So this is a little statue I bought one time. Little tortoise, little turtle, right? Very cute. Made of metal, right? Very heavy. Would not want to drop this on anything. But what is it really? I mean, I call it a turtle, but I know it's not a real turtle. I can call it a statue. But what is a statue? I mean, is there something intrinsically a part of that thing that created the word statue? Nope, because I can go over into France or Spain, and this will not be called the same word, which means that words are arbitrary. They are creations of a human at some point in time that we could communicate a thing, right? That I could talk to someone and say, hey, you see this statue? They would say, yes, I see it. Talk about it and discuss it. And that's valuable, right? Not that communication is not valuable. It's how we've gotten here. But it's important to remember that the word statue is not an absolute truth. It is a made up thing. In fact, all words are the same way. But what happens when we create a word for a thing? It defines that thing. It puts limits on what that is and what it can be. It limits the potential of the object. For example, this turtle is hollowed out. So it could be a bowl, right? I guess I wouldn't want to, but it's probably not sanitary. But I could put food in here. I could pour water in here and drink out of it. Cup. But if I call it a statue, it's just going to sit here on my desk. Another example is good and bad. This is my favorite example. When we say something is good, it defines what good can be. So, for example, if I say today is going to be a good day, someone in chat said that this could be a tiny hat. I guess it could be very heavy. And if it falls off and hits your toes, that's a broken toe. Yeah, good. When you define, let's say today is going to be a great day. You ever get told that when you grow up? The parents are like, just keep telling yourself, today is going to be a great day. And the day doesn't go the way you want. And then you get unhappy because you're like, I told myself it was going to be a great day 100 times and it didn't work out. Now I'm mad. It's self-defeating, isn't it? Like it's so crazy that we do this to ourselves. Or if something happens to me and I say, this is bad, right? This is a bad thing. Or even worse, someone tells you that's bad. That makes you feel awful, right? Because we have related our emotional state to these constructs of good and bad. So if someone tells you that is bad or you are bad, you feel bad, you feel awful, you get sad and depressed. But if we let go of these self-definitions of what good and bad are, and we realize that those are just constructs, it can release a lot of our anxiety, a lot of our tension, and a lot of our depression. And it will make you feel better. Your life can be a little happier, a little bit more joyful. It's not to say that sadness is not a real emotion, and that physical pain does not, does not exist. Those absolutely exist, right? And it's a nature of our reality. But there is something to be said about keeping that in your mind, that this is not a pen, this is not a cup. They are just, they just are. Things are what they are, and don't limit yourself. Don't limit the things and the people around you based off of the words that you call them, because they're not the word. They are unique, individual, living people. And let them be that. Let them be who they are. In the chat, Don Carpenter says, start with the positive. Have a great day. The day brings what it brings. That is a moment in time. Enjoy it. Indeed. Let your days be what they are. Right? Start your day happy. But do not expect certain actions to occur. Right? And losing those expectations, I think, brings happiness. It does for me. Okay. Chapter 23, Renewal. City on a hill, untouched land beyond. A fallow field is the secret of fertility. In the city, we see millions of lives represented in the windows, doors, and many floors of each building. We see excitement and the glories of civilization. But no matter how much those who follow Tao may enjoy the city, they understand the need for retreat into nature. Ah, yes. In the countryside, they find the nurturing quality of freedom. They can see new possibilities and can wander without social impositions. In the past, pioneers saw the open prairies and were filled with dreams of dominating nature with the glories of man. Now we know different. We must preserve the wilds for our very survival. We need time to lie fallow. If you cannot leave the city, just find a little quiet time each day to withdraw into yourself. If you are able to walk in fields or in the hills, so much the better. But none of us can maintain the fertility of our beings without renewal. I see the question by Patty Murphy, and I'll get to that here in just a second. In this chapter, I want to talk about going outside. I take several classes by another YouTuber, another Taoist fellow. He's from England. His name is George Thompson. I highly recommend you check out some of his classes in his YouTube channel. Then during one class, I think it was the first class I ever took with him, he expressed the same sentiment. We had homework every week that we were to go out and practice our Qigong in nature, whether that's outside, in the grass, under a tree, if there's a park or wooded area, go there. But he wanted us to put ourselves in as much natural surroundings as possible. Now he lives in London, so it's pretty hard. I have been to London, and man, there's very little nature anywhere around there unless you live by a park. The same way here where I live in Fort Worth, Texas, It's, the closest you can get to nature is your backyard, your front yard. I don't even have a tree on my property, but there is a park in my neighborhood, a few blocks away, 2 or 3 blocks away. So I think you'd be surprised, if you haven't tried it before, if you sit in your house and you meditate versus going outside and meditating, the difference how different that feels. Um, there's something to being connected to all that life around you that brings you closer to who you truly are. I think that's the closest I can describe it. In the Tao Te Ching, the very first verse is, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao, right? Which means you can't put into words what Tao is. Going back to the last chapter, the word Tao is just something we made up, right? Something someone made up thousands of years ago, right? It was just a meaning for the way or the path, right? It's not a special name. We make it special, but I don't think it was intended to be. But yeah, being out and he used to tell us to go touch a tree, right? Like every day, let's go outside and touch a tree, and just feel it. Like just feel something natural. Humans didn't evolve to sit in chairs and stare at computer screens all day. Like, I'm sorry, it just didn't happen that way. Thousands and thousands of years go by, and we evolved legs to move, and eyes to see, and the sensation of touch to go touch things, and being pooped away alone all the time is not who we naturally are supposed to be, right? Not who we evolved into being. So there is a renewing process. You put yourself into nature. And that's what this chapter is really getting at, right? Many Taoists believe that you can absorb natural energies directly from the universe itself and cultivate those energies through Tai Chi and Qigong. In fact, there's a spot in your body just below your belly button called the Dantian. It's called my teacher calls it your little energy factory, right? It's like a little power plant in your body, and it creates energy so that you can then go about and use it. But do that to take in energy requires you to move, perform certain movements, and do certain things. Energy cultivation is a very real practice. Have you ever woken up and done nothing all day long? You just kind of sat around. And I thought you got too little sleep or too much sleep. You didn't do anything all day. And you feel really tired. You feel exhausted. You just sleep all day. Well, how can that be? Right? You didn't do anything stressful. You just watch TV all day. It's very lethargic. But then you feel really tired. So, a lot of people think that when you go to sleep, your body, gathers energy, and then, when you wake up, you have this much energy. You kind of use it throughout the day till you go back to sleep, gain more. Well, Taoists believe that's not the case. That your body is an energy factory, and just like a factory, it must move in order to create the energy you can use. You ever gone for a jog and felt more energetic afterwards, or played a game of soccer with your friends or football or basketball and then felt more healthy after? Well, how can that be? If I have a certain amount of energy and I'm using it throughout the day and I play a game of basketball, my energy should bottom out and I should just be exhausted. But what's really happening is I play that game and that gives me more energy. My body comes alive. I have absorbed energy from the universe. I've fed off of it. And now I have more oomph to follow the rest of my day, right? And that's really what this chapter is getting into, right? Without being so specific. You have to go be in nature, do things, be outside, right? Even if it's just in your backyard, right? You don't have to go to France. You don't have to go to the Wudong Mountains in China, right? You can just be at home, but just get some sunshine. You'll be surprised the renewal process that occurs. All right, in chat. The first question is, what is my favorite translation of the Tao Te Ching and Chuangzi? Oh man, well, I have them right here. This is the Tao Te Ching translated by Guy Fu Feng and Jane English. Not necessarily for beginners, maybe like a good second translation, but I do really enjoy this translation. I think it does a good job of not being too complex with its word and still being true to the original word for word translation. For Chuangzi, for those who may not know, Chuangzi is kind of the second text that came along in Taoism. Again, more of a collected works probably than a single author. But Chuangzi was a real person. They're almost assuredly that he's a real person. He existed about 2,000 years ago as well. A lot of things that have been written under him are probably not his. But if you're looking for it, it's called the Inro chapters. That's what I enjoy, because those are the chapters that they're fairly certain that this one guy wrote. My favorite translation is very different. It is an illustrated translation by C.C. Sai. And what you'll notice is it is a comic book. And you'll notice it's got the original Chinese over there. Well, not the original Chinese, but the Mandarin, modern Mandarin over there on the sides. It is super cool. The reason why I like this one is that Chuangzi is really funny. He is very comedic in nature. For example, he named his characters in his stories words that don't make any sense, like animal names, or like just random things that he just picked. Just be funny. But yeah, it's great. So when you see these illustrated, the humor really comes alive, as you can see facial expressions and movements, and it's amazing. That is by far my favorite Chuangzi. Now you have to be careful with it. It's heavily edited. Some of those stories that you'll find in an actual book translation of Chuangzi are multiple pages long, but when you open this one, it's like three pages of comic frames, right? So there's a lot left out to where he could, manipulate it to be a back and forth. But it's still enjoyable. I still really like it. Dozens and dozens of stories in this one. I think it's really cool. Okay. Aldi said, I had to look this one up myself. Fallow is plowed and harrowed, but left unsown for a period in order to restore its fertility as part of a crop rotation or to avoid surplus production. Oh, yeah. Sometimes I read these chapters and I'm like, I'm going to ignore that word and just pretend like I know what that means. So I appreciate you looking these things up. Don said, we have evolved away from the moment. Stop, breath, and pay attention to you. Yes, indeed. Stop running around. Always a good idea. Try and take a moment, right? Just close your eyes and just think just a second. That's where mantras come into play, right? You really want, mantras help you. If you don't know what a mantra is, it's a repetitive phrase that you just silently or maybe audibly just say over and over and over again, right? And it helps you to clear your mind and you just concentrate on this one thing. And it helps relieve stress, anxiety, and tension that you have built up in your body or in your mind. So yeah, using that mantra or just taking a second to use that mantra will go a long way in just kind of relaxing a little bit, especially when you get frustrated. It's hard to do. I'm not saying that you're never going to get frustrated or angry or mad, or you won't ever yell again, but allowing those emotions to come up and then go away, that's the key, right? Learning how to let go of those things. And there's a practice to it, right? Just like riding a bicycle, letting go of anger, hard, right? It takes practice. A lot of times it'll take someone to show it to you, give you a mirror and say, look, you are very angry. Go through your practices, right? Like just go take a breath and calm down, right? It's hard. Aldi says, I used to play basketball for hours and still feel energetic. Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, I went on vacation in May. I took a trip with my family to London and in London, France, and we walked just miles. I don't think I've ever walked so much in my entire life. And I mean, all throughout the day, yeah, my feet hurt, but I was so energetic. Like I just had the energy to keep going and keep going and keep going further than I ever thought I'd be able to go. And I was really worried about it when I went on the trip. But it worked, getting out there and being outside and soaking in that sun and taking in your surroundings really does give you the energy to keep going. But if you just sit there and do nothing, you just have no energy, right? Oh yeah, yeah. BB Chico says my favorite as well. Love the art. Yes, there's actually a illustrated version of the Tao Te Ching which I don't have by the same person, but I want to get it. I just haven't come around to getting it. I'm really bad at seeing a book and saying, "Oh man, I want this book," and I get it, and it sits on my shelf, and I don't do anything with it. So I try not to overly hoard books, but on a selfish level, I do enjoy looking over there at a bookshelf and being like, "Look at all these books." I know it's bad, or maybe it's not bad. I don't know. We just talked about what's bad and what's good, but man, that makes me feel good. It's a selfish thing, I guess. Yeah. So I try not to buy things I'm not going to read. Yeah. Aldi says, I need illustrations sometimes. The one you like looks fun. It is. It's super fun. Especially for Chuang Zap. That guy's a nut in a good way. Some of those stories are absolutely hilarious. Don Carpenter says, use the mantra of a great day. Yeah, have a great day. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I used to do that. I used to wake up every day and be like, today's going to be a great day. Today's going to be a great day. Today's going to be a great day. And then it wasn't. And then I felt worse. Yeah, it happens. You know what? We are who we are, and our culture is going to train us the way it does. And it's hard to fight your culture sometimes. All right. Let's move on to one more chapter. And then we'll get out of here. All right. Our final chapter for the day is Laughter. Hilly village lanes, whitewashed sunlit walls, cerulean sea, the laughter of children. No matter where in the world you go, no matter how many languages are spoken, no matter how many times cultures and governments clash, the laughter of children is universally uplifting. The mirth of adults can be variously jealous, insecure, sadistic, cruel, or absurd, but the sound of playing children evokes the ideal of a simple and pure act. There are no concepts, no ideologies, only the innocent pleasure of life. We, as adults, dwell upon our grizzled complexity, our existential anxieties, and our preoccupations with responsibilities. We hear the merriment of children and may sigh over our lost childhood. Although we can no longer fit into our old clothes and become young again, we can take comfort in the optimism of children. Their rejoicing can gladden us all. We are too often in a rush for our children to grow up. It is far better for them to fully live each year of their lives. Let them learn what is appropriate to their time. Let them play. And when their childhood is spent at adolescence, help them in a gentle transition. Then their laughter will continue to resonate with cheer and hope for us all. Man. Let's be real. I have children. I have 3 children, although they're not children much anymore. 15, almost 12, and almost 10. And if any of you have raised children or been close around children to watch them grow up, there's a point where you notice their laugh changes. And they go from this kind of child laugh and they enter into almost like an adult laugh. It's hard to describe, but it's a real thing, I promise. And just the way they behave changes. It's slowly at first and then all at once, right? Like you'll notice it start to change, and then all of a sudden you'll see an old video of them and you'll be like, oh my gosh, they don't do that anymore. I talked to my mother-in-law about it once, and she said that everybody goes through it, and it's hard to see in the moment, but you have to kind of look backwards, and then you'll see it. You can only control a child so long, right? It's not when they're young, you can control everything they do. Especially when they're newborn, you feed them, you clothe them, you wash them, you put them on a potty. Like it's everything. You do everything for them all the time. And then they learn how to walk. And so you're like, okay, well, I still have to do everything for them, but at least they can go from point A to point B, and then I can do everything. And then they learn how to open doors, and they learn how to speak, and then they learn how to feed themselves, maybe wash themselves, body train them, all kinds of things. And then you realize that those physical needs, you don't need to provide for them, right? You're not doing physical activities for them. It's a guidance now, right? Your job as a parent is now to kind of steer them within certain boundaries. And sometimes they bump up against those boundaries. They cross them and push them over, push them back across that line. But as they get older and older and older, if you sit there and take those boundaries and really narrow them out, right? You just try and force them into this line that the more you hold, the more you squeeze, the stronger that counter will be. So you have to balance that control. And here, they use the example of laughter and innocence as that kind of unspoken natural state that you are as a child. You know, in Taoist texts, you'll hear a lot about, you know, returning to your true nature, right? Returning the Tao, your original way. When we're children, we're very in tune with that original way. We're very, you know, our culture in English, we call it the innocence, right? Childlike innocence. And when you laugh, you laugh innocently, right? Children find things funny that adults won't find funny because they have that innocence about them. And as we grow up, it's the societal rules. It's, you know, the rule of the many, the rule of the majority, that really kind of pigeonholes us into these boxes, right? It's those labels that we've come up with, that really you internalize. You think, okay, well, for me, you know, I am a white married man, 40 years old, you know, and that puts me in certain boxes. So when I see things, I'm seeing it through my perception of a white married man. But children don't, right? Children see things for what they are. But that's why they ask questions like say that. Like, oh my God, don't say that out loud, right? But it's just because they're innocent. It's just because they see something and they ask it. That is the innocence in them. So in this chapter, in our final chapter of the day, I love this first sentence. No matter where in the world you go, no matter how many languages are spoken, and no matter how many times cultures and governments clash, the laughter of children is universally uplifting. Because it doesn't matter where the child is born, what language they speak, or what government their country runs, that true self is always the same, right? If you go and look at children from across the planet, they could be poor, they could be rich, they could be a myriad of different colors and societies, but there's something intrinsically whole about children everywhere, and we should value that, especially as they grow up. We should continue to value that in nature and not squash it out of them with rules and regulations, right? Try and allow them to naturally grow with just some help. All right. Indeed, my friends. Well, been fun. I enjoyed another fun Sunday morning with you. Um, I will put in some transitions in between chapters, and I'll try and do some chapter markings this time. So if you are reading this later, you can probably click on the description and find your different chapters. Cool. Thank you guys. I'll be here next week, Sunday morning. Don't forget, you can follow along with all the articles the Taoist Online publishes at thedaoistonline.org. We have lots of different ways you can give back. I'd really appreciate it. Any merchandise sales or any donations we get, I give those back to the writers in the form of tips every month. I try to break even with the money I bring in versus the money I give out to all the writers in the community. So yeah, I'd really appreciate it. Of course, there's a Ko-Fi link right here on the bottom of the video, and we'd all really appreciate it if you could make a donation. Thank you guys. Love you all, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.